I'm your host, Ruth Roach, and this is where we get real with the people who make our industry what it is today. Today, my guest is Gerard Scarpaci, and wow, what a story, going from stylist to industry icon and leader that he is by having founded HairBrain, which is a community of over 1.5 million hairdressers dedicated to their craft. So, his story speaks for itself. I'm not going to go on for too long. Let's just dig in. Okay, Gerard, so tell us what brought you into this wonderful world of hairdressing.
Just like a lot of us in the industry, I just wasn't cut out to spend my life in school. After high school, which I barely made it through, I did go to like a local kind of community college, and I just hated it. It took me like an hour to get there every day, and it's like 2 hours every day, or just wasted in traveling someplace you didn't really want to be. So I just started sleeping in and not going. My mother caught on, and she's like, "You don't have to go to school." I'm thankful for that. She wasn't that type. She's like, "But you got to do something, especially at the age you're at. You got to pick a trade or do something." And I had an uncle that had kind of dabbled in hairdressing. He never, did it professionally or got a license, but he used to cut friends and family. And at least he knew a little bit about the world. And he told me, you just go to a local school. And then after that, you get your license, and then you can, become an apprentice. From the beginning, I knew you had to like train, because he told me you got to train. He had some great videos from like Sassoon and Trevor Sorby. So I like, right from even before I went to school, I was watching that stuff and thinking, oh, this is pretty cool. Like, swinging in London and cool haircuts, and,
Yeah.
it kind of fit with being into music, or we used to call it new wave in the
Oh my
late
God,
80s.
right.
Yeah. All these guys seem really new wave to me. So I just did it, jumped in,
Yeah,
never looked back.
that's so cool. That's cool. Me too. So you ended up going from there. You ended up at Sassoon's. How did you get there?
Yeah, I mean, just like most things in this career, this industry, it's about your circle, who you connect with. One of my first connections was with a girl. Her name was Nikki. I never saw her again, but Nikki in cosmetology school. And she told me that she worked in a salon in Manhattan. It was brand new. It was really cool. There was education. And she thought that the owner would like me. His name is Vince Smith. He's still there. I mean, he's over 35 years now. That's how far back we're going here. He was maybe in his first year or so. And he just put me on the right path, training, helping me appreciate the craft and technical ability. And he was like, he would go to London every year to train at Sassoon. So I had this like Sassoon thing kind of in the first few years. And, as hard as it was, at some point I realized that, after a year of training with Vince, I kind of wanted to go to the mountain. I really wanted to go to Sassoon. So I went interviewed there, and they liked me and they hired me.
Yeah, but tell me the story. I heard the story about your interview.
Yeah, I mean, it was this, we're talking about like 1991, and Sassoon's was a powerhouse. It was the concourse level of the GM building on 59th Street across from the Plaza Hotel. You couldn't ask for a more incredible location. It was maybe, I don't know, over 50 chairs in the place, because he had a cutting and styling, a color, and a barbering department. The barbering department, we also served as like a training area. And when I went in for the interview, and they do an interview once a month, they call it like a cattle call or an open call. There was like 60 people there interviewing to be assistants or apprentices. And in those days, that would happen every month, because everyone knew you had to get great training. You were either going to pay for it or you were going to be an apprentice.
Yeah.
So I was young enough that I could be an apprentice. I got interviewed by a woman called Olga, who was the manager, and she was looking over my resume, and I didn't really have a resume, but you just filled in a thing, and they asked for references. And on the bottom, I had put Vince Smith, and, I put stylist / owner of the salon. And she's like, something intrigued her that I put that he was a stylist and not just the owner. Like, I think she could see that meant I was kind of craft focused or something. And,
That's so
then
cool.
I ended up working at Sassoon's for the next 10 years.
Wow. Wow. Lucky. Well, not lucky.
Yeah, there's a lot.
No, I
No,
mean,
no, there's a lot of
I'm just
luck.
jealous. So you were there for a while, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I went through the training there on 59th Street. was the dream to become a stylist. I was by 20 years old, I was a stylist on 59th Street and Fifth Avenue at the time. I think this junior level, this is like 1992, I was getting like $70 for a haircut, which was kind of wild,
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
20 years old and doing that. I also pretty much right away at Sassoon's, when you get on the floor, you have to start in those days anyway. I don't know if this is still true. You start training other apprentices. So they'd be like, okay, Gerard, Wednesday the 10th or whatever is you're going to be leading the hands-on for the apprentices. And I just love that. I love the training. That was my favorite part of my whole career, was being an apprentice and like a young teacher, where everything's just focused on the hair and the work. Working on clients, I still do it and I love it. But to be honest, I think it's kind of easy. I mean, you just have to make that one person happy. And if you've got any basic skill, you can do it like 99% of the time.
Yeah.
But in education, you've got people are talking about your graduated Bob and, how could it have been better? And why did you do this? And why did you do? And I just like that analytical approach. I just
Yeah.
kind of really enjoyed it, especially at that time.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
why, right?
Yeah, the why.
Why the hell am I doing this? Then you
Sure.
know from there on out what to do when you need that, right?
Absolutely. And I found that by having to explain stuff to people over and over again, you really start to own it. You can't just be like, well, I just do it and it works.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's not teaching,
Yep. Yeah. It's true. The only way to do that is to teach it through, right? To kind of get
100%.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even from folding towels the right way, and that's
I'm
how it
still
was at
working on it.
Sassoon's. The culture was, as soon as you learn something, you had to teach it to someone. So, there's always this churn of assistants because, at any given time, there could be 10, 15 assistants, and the next week, half of them would be gone because, they weren't making any money, they didn't like it, or,
Yeah.
or they failed. You could literally you'd fail your haircuts and they'd fire you. This is a different time.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. All right. So you have talked about you had Vince and you had that was one of your mentors.
Yeah, it was my first mentor for sure, the owner of the first salon I worked in.
Yeah. So would you say your roots are kind of there, right?
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
right there in Battery Park City and Manhattan, right? A couple blocks away from the World Trade Center. The first time the World Trade Center got bombed, I was shampooing someone's hair.
Oh my
We were just a
God.
few blocks away and everything kind of vibrated.
Oh,
And then people were like, this is in the 90s, early
yeah.
90s. People
Yeah.
were running down the street and everything. And we were like, wait, what?
Oh my God,
Yeah,
how
that's
scary.
pretty crazy memory.
Yeah. Wow. Did you finish the shampoo?
I think so. I think we had to. Yeah, I think we did. It wasn't until we got like back into the salon that we were like, well, what just happened? It sounded
Yeah.
like I remember it thinking like, in Manhattan, they when there's big potholes, they put these like metal plates over them. And sometimes like a truck hits them and they're like, boom. So I
Yeah.
thought it was just that.
Yeah. Something only a New Yorker knows what you're talking about.
Uh-huh. Yeah. It's like a,
Yes. Okay. So you were at Sassoon's for quite a while, and then what happened?
yeah, I mean, I discovered I loved teaching and I got some opportunities because of the IBS show in New York. I was a stylist, educator in the salon, and I got to work on stage at the booth. And Stephen Moody, who most of your listeners will know, he was the kind of principal of all the Sassoon academies in North America. Later went on to be globally in charge of education at Sassoon. But this is kind of the early days. It's again still in the 90s, I guess 94 or 95 or something like that. And he was like, hey, you're a good teacher. You ever think about moving to California, working the academy full time? And I was not real. I'm a New Yorker, and I just thought I would never want to be in California, even though I'd never been there. But he said, hey, we'll bring you out for a month. We need some coverage. We'll put you up, you make your salary, and you see how you like it. And I loved it. And, I did that month, and I turned around and packed my bags and moved out to California and worked in the academy in Santa Monica on the Promenade, and then the new one that had opened, Santa Monica Boulevard, for about 5 years. Took me up to around like 2000.
Well, and now you're back in LA, right?
I'm south of LA, so I still have a place in New York. My wife and
Yeah.
I have an apartment in New York, and then we have a house in Orange County, which is where she grew up. So we
Oh,
have both of
okay.
our, yeah.
Oh, cool.
So
That's so
I try to
cool.
spend, more time here because it's a house and I have a little land and a dog and everything, as opposed to New York where it's an apartment. It's a nice
Yeah.
apartment, but it's still an apartment.
You're still bumping into the walls. Yeah.
Yeah, but I go in every month to do clients, see family and friends, and do New York things.
Cool. Awesome. So, would you say that when you went to the academy, that that was a defining moment in your career?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it just, like as I mentioned, after training in the salon, when I get on the floor, I wasn't fulfilled as a stylist. It wasn't about learning anymore. We'd maybe once or twice a year, there'd be like a stylist workshop or something like that. But it was like, okay, you're done now. Go do your haircuts and make money. And, a lot of the hairdressers were just living their lives. I mean, I look back now and I admire them, they had their country house or who was having a baby or this or that. But I was like, no, I don't want that. I want to just focus on my career, my craft.
Yeah.
And it was more focused on that in an academy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was just more all consuming, which is what I wanted at that time.
Yeah. That's cool. And so you're at the academy. I just fascinated. I'm like, so selfishly want to know every detail.
Mhm.
So you then were doing that for quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, so you had a cosmetology school and weekly advanced classes in Santa Monica. So there was, in the cosmetology school at that time, there was no Aveda, Paul Mitchell, or anything like that. It was, you either went there because it was the Harvard of hair, or you went to, mom and pop's beauty school. So yeah, we had a bustling international group of students, kids from Japan, Korea, all over the US, whose
It's
parents,
amazing.
I mean, some of them were wealthy and some of them were just like, hey, we saved for college, but you decided you wanted to be a hairdresser. So we're going to send you to the best place. So you kind of started working in cosmetology, there was someone who specialized in getting them to pass the state board. And the Sassoon educators, we would teach them, they'd have color segment and cut segments. I was a cutter, so I would teach them everything about cutting for like 6 weeks and then work with them on paying models for a couple months and kind of work. And again, if you want to learn how to get good at a graduated bob, there's nothing like doing 10 of them at the same time, and then seeing all the mistakes that people make and try, how do you fix it and how do you avoid it?
Yeah.
So, you do that, a couple dozen times, you kind of start to learn and develop. If you were successful with that, then they would put you to do advanced training. So that's where people who are already hairdressers would come for a wide variety of courses.
Yeah.
Um, and there was one called comprehensive cutting, which was a 6-week cutting course. And most people didn't like that because they didn't really want to be with the same group for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
But I loved it. I loved the
Yeah.
connections. I loved the people, their stories. Had some great classes there that, one of the proudest things ever. I had a group write a letter to Vidal. He was still alive. And then
Wow.
Vidal came in and gave me it wasn't handwritten, but it was typed up by someone on his staff,
Yeah.
congratulating me. I have it in my New York apartment hanging on the wall
Cool.
that, him saying to me that I filled him with pride that I was carrying on his legacy based on what all these students had written to him. It's pretty awesome.
That is
Yeah.
really awesome.
But on
Wow.
the flip side of that, the same letter was sent to some of my bosses at Sassoon, and they never even brought it up. So it just shows you the difference that people
Yes.
like Vidal, that not everyone's Vidal. They were just like another thing, just move on.
Yeah.
So that was a big learning curve for me right there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how it's like some people in our industry are like geeks and some just aren't,
Yeah.
right? The
Yep.
hair geeks I'm talking about. I mean,
Totally.
we're all geeks, but
Yeah.
you know. Um, okay, so how did you end up back in New York then?
I mean, as I said, I just got to a certain point where I realized that I didn't have a big future doing what I was doing. I think, those who maybe controlled my destiny at that time would have been happy for me to just do the exact same thing forever. And,
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but that was my perception at the time. And I was like, I want more.
Yeah.
I'll go out and get it. And that's what I did. I just said, okay, thank you. It's been an awesome time working here. I've been one of the biggest supporters of Sassoon to this day, but I knew there wasn't like the right future for me there.
Right. Cool.
Yeah, so after I left, I did freelance education. I worked with a really successful salon in Atlanta. The owner at the time was thinking about opening something in New York, and we had talked about partnering. But after about 9 months, I realized it wasn't going to happen, that it just wasn't, a viable thing. So I said, well, I'll just go back and do it on my own. And instead of being in Manhattan, maybe I'll do it in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Brooklyn wasn't what it is today. People know it as, even in the early 2000s, it was still kind of, rough and ready.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, all right, I have a friend that's a carpenter, and my brother can do this, and I know an electrician, I know a plumber, and I just got it together and launched my own place.
That's so cool. And when was that?
We opened in like literally August of 2001.
Yep.
And I was able to keep that business going and growing and hiring up until about 2008, where I was able to sell it to another local salon owner who was in a four-way partnership and wanted to get out, knew that I was doing education, and I was offered this role with Aveda. And he said, hey, you don't get rich selling a salon. Most of us don't anyway. But it covered all my expenses. I was able to put a little money in the bank for the first time in my young adult life, because I was probably only, in my early 30s at the time. Have some money
Wow.
in the bank and have some freedom.
Yeah. That's a lot to have done by the age of 30.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
crazy.
like I said, I started early, like
Yeah.
literally a week of college and then right into hairdressing.
Yeah. Oh, you weren't kidding when you said a
Nope.
week.
Mm-mm. No, not at all.
That's awesome. Oh my goodness. All right. When did you start the pillar of our industry, one of the pillars of our industry, HairBrain? How did that happen?
Again, it's just like I keep saying, it's about the connections, the people that are around you. So I was, while selling the salon and after selling the salon, I was working for Aveda
Yeah.
corporate as an artistic director at an advanced academy they had opened in New York. Beautiful facility. They wanted some full-time people there. Um, and they, made it worth my while. Again, first time in my life where I was getting like a decent salary every week, and great benefits of working for a company like Estee Lauder, stock options, and all this kind of stuff. I was like, wow. And as I was doing that, we were teaching classes every week or going on the road or doing shows. We're supported by the Pure Professionals, which was an Aveda thing. It's like their associate program.
Yeah.
And one of them became close friends of mine, Randy Taylor. And he had this idea around 2005, 2006 of bringing social and digital to help connect educators to students. That was like the real idea. Like you teach people every weekend and then they're gone.
Yeah.
And then, before these early days of social media, there wasn't really this, you couldn't build a network, a social network. So he discovered that there were these platforms that you could do whatever you want.
Yeah.
There was something called Ning at the time, Ning, where you could build a community. People could make a profile, they could put a photo, they could upload photos, they could upload videos, they could blog, they could do this, they could do that. It was computer based because nobody did any, nobody, there were no iPhones.
I remember that. I was part of it. I mean,
Yeah.
I joined.
Yeah. So we kind of, were the first, there was always traditional media and, maybe like websites for hairdressers, which were just traditional media on a screen. But we were like the first real true community
Yeah.
where all the content came from the members. I mean, we weren't like media people. We didn't like write articles or we used to get all these press releases and just hit delete, 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 delete. I'm like, maybe eventually they'll catch on,
Yeah.
because it wasn't about that. It was about the engagement between the artists on the platform.
Yeah. Well, to me, when you started it and even today, like it's truly unique in our
Thank you.
industry, what you've done. And I just think it's so cool how far it has grown and come and how cool it is.
Thank
I'm
you.
so
Thank you.
glad. And it's cool. And I got to see the beginning of it,
Yeah.
you know? So I'm lucky. So talk about what you're doing right now with what you're offering now through HairBrain. Like, how has it
Yeah.
evolved?
I mean, from our original platform, which was a standalone, it wasn't a .com, it was a .me. We did have app versions of it. It was mobile, but at a certain point, you can't compete with Meta and TikTok. So
Yeah.
luckily, we had like a two-pronged strategy pretty early on where we had our own platform, but we became very active on Facebook first and then Instagram, et cetera. and we were able to keep building so that when it, nowadays people don't, there are no niche, they may, I should take that back. There are some,
Yeah.
but they're small and maybe they have different, goals than we had. So we were able to focus on social media, really grow our awareness, our connectivity, along the way, connect with great brands that were like-minded. So, after all those years of deleting press releases, finally people were like, well, how do we work with you? And
Yeah.
we're like, hey, you sponsor something, sponsor education.
Yeah.
Do Facebook Lives with your artists, do long form courses that we'll host, live events together. On our social, let's create unique content that, has value to the hairdresser. And once we win hearts and minds, then they'll be interested in your product. It's like, we don't do ads of product because nobody wants to look at that anymore.
Nope.
Yeah. Who am I talking to? Who am I learning from? Who am I connecting with? Who's behind them? What do they use? I mean, it's just like a natural evolution. So we have a pretty vast social and digital platform to connect hairdressers to each other, to brands that they might want to work with, and vice versa, distribution to brands to customers, because it's this big ecosystem of over 3 million people globally.
Wow.
And then from there, we have our own pro store because back to being a geek. I've always been a geek about tools and supplies.
I shop there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And
I
do think that, and I say back to the early days, I remember some of the hairdressers that I worked with or trained with were like, it doesn't matter what comb or scissor you use. And I was always like, no, it does. It actually makes it, it doesn't make you a great hairdresser. No. But it can make the ergonomics much better. It can make the feeling of the work better. And it, it might give you that little bit of an edge. It's not going to make you automatically because you have good tools if you haven't done the training. But if you've done the training and you've done the practice and you're all in, the tools will definitely help. And, they can be beautiful. And, so that's been a big part. And, from the beginning, we've always kind of dabbled in events, but events are a big thing. It's a lot of investment, a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of bodies to get hundreds of people together. I keep hitting my watch. It keeps time. I'm not checking what time it is, but I keep hitting it. So, after 10 years of kind of dabbling in it and supporting other people's events and brands, last year we launched our first major event, which was called HB Fest, HairBrain Fest. It was a 3-day event in Palm Springs at the JW Marriott. We sold out over 500 attendees and probably about 40 touch points of education between breakout rooms, main stage. We'll be back again this year, even bigger stages, more breakouts, some hands-on. Yeah, even bigger. But the one thing that we're not changing is the size of the attendees. Mm-hmm. I think that there's lots of great things happening that have like 5 or 6 people in them. Yeah. And there's lots of great things happening that maybe 30,000 people go to, but like the smaller quality things, I think some brands do that, but it's just their own ecosystem, so it's kind of incestuous. It's just the same 1,000 people or whatever, or 2,000, where, what was unique about it was non-denominational. It was different people from all over the place. There's definitely brand involvement, but there's a lot of independent involvement. And proud to say a lot of those brands were like, hey, we'll sponsor the independent people, which made it interesting and different. It wasn't just like, the representative of X brand. It was like the brand and the independent working together in a new way. Yeah. Yeah. So we've got that scheduled again for 2025, September 13th to the 15th. Tickets aren't on sale for that yet because we're doing a tour building up to it called HB Sessions. Yeah. So these are smaller events, 200, 250 people in some towns that I really love. We started here in Orange, where I live in California, Orange County. We're doing New York next. Then we're doing Minneapolis. And then we're looking to add one other city. It looks like it's probably going to be St. Louis. And that might be either before or after HB Fest. So we've got a full plate with events. You do. My goodness. That's cool. I'm going to come in September, but so in New York, you're doing it around the time of the IBS. Are you doing your? Yeah. We've 11 years ago, we launched a video competition for hairdressers, even before, because we had our own platform and, people were putting video there before you couldn't even put up video on Instagram. People were putting video up on HairBrain. And we were like, wow, I mean, at the end of the year, we'd sometimes have, I don't know, 10,000 videos uploaded. I mean, it's nothing compared to Instagram these days. But back then it was like, wow, did you even know 8,000 hairdressers were independently making videos,
Right.
And they were. So we started to say, hey, let's do an awards. And that's grown and grown and grown. So we've always done that as a nighttime event. You've been many times, and your friends, your crew, to have like a kind of, and again, something different. It's not the rubber chicken dinner where everybody sits at a table, or it's also not, like a place for me or anyone else to get on stage and just talk for 4 hours and just
No,
constantly, we move quick and it's a
you
party.
do.
Like we talk about the artists, we give them the awards, and then we party. So it's different if you haven't ever been to that.
You have
And
to
then this
go.
year we thought, hey, well, since we're doing all this education, why don't we do a full day of education, give people a chance to go home, wash up, go to dinner, and then come back and do the awards at night.
Yeah.
So we'll be starting at like 9:30 in the morning, giving people a break from about 4 to 8. And then from 8 to midnight, they can come back and party. And what they do after midnight is their business.
That's fun. That's
Yeah.
a full day.
Yeah. Yeah.
24 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, probably about 250 people will take advantage of that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm going this year. I'll see you there.
I can't wait to see you. It's been too long.
Yeah. Okay. Out of all the things that you've done and all the highlights, what would you say is what are you most proud of?
I mean, I'd say I'm most proud of the connections that I've made and the connections that people have made with each other through building a real community, that has a belief system and an understanding and a way of looking at our craft. I think, that is what the greats, you can talk about, again, I'll go back to Sassoon. Sassoon to me, more than anything, was a culture.
Yeah.
And it was a culture that you didn't have to just work at Sassoon. It touched so many different people in so many different ways. And it was a culture of excellence and being the best that you can be and putting the craft first, that this is and can be a highly rewarding and highly regarded profession. So I think when that all boils down to little old me and hairbrained, it's like, we try to keep that alive in a new way and try to create connections. I know there are people who've got together and opened businesses or got together and taught classes, or one became a mentor or another, and they connected through our social and digital world, or even our real life events.
Yep. Cool. Well, you've done a lot. I feel like I just lived this great career.
Yeah, it's, I've just been, there's a lot of luck, but there's also, and I just keep saying, it's all about relationships. It's who you hang around with.
Yeah. But it's also your ambition, your not ambition, but your
No, I
passion.
don't think ambition is a dirty word. I
Yeah.
was always ambitious because I'm like, if I'm going to do this and put my all into it, I want to be successful. I want to get something back. And that doesn't just mean money.
Yeah.
It just means, I want to be noticed. I want to be recognized, appreciated. I mean, money always comes if that stuff happens, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, at least enough to live a decent life,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think ambition is one of the things that I would describe myself as being ambitious for sure.
So what would you tell someone who is, and not necessarily starting out, like someone who's in the business for a while, who is feeling burned out? What would you suggest?
I mean, the first thing I would want to know is like, where are they at with their craft? When was the last time they took a class or
Yeah.
even sat through an online tutorial? I mean, it's like at your fingertips now. It used to be so difficult.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. Usually they're not learning and trying new things. So that would be the first thing I would say. Of course there are other, if they're working in a place that just isn't giving them what they need in many ways, that's something they can control. So like, what's your education about? What's your job status like? Those are the things you might need to look at to kind of reignite that passion. Or
Yeah.
just being honest with yourself. And did you ever really even have it? I mean, it's not,
Yeah.
you can just do something else. Is it,
Yeah.
are you calling it burnout because maybe you never really loved it? That's one thing. Maybe you could find something you love, or did you love it? And if you lost that, you can always get it back with your craft, I believe.
Yeah.
try something that scares you. I mean, I love Sassoons. The first thing I did was pick up a razor.
Yeah.
Maybe a lot of listeners don't know this, but Sassoons was the anti-razor. That was, one of the ways that he had built his point of difference in the company was, geometrics and strong shapes. That always evolved.
Yeah.
And eventually they were cutting hair like razor cuts, but with a scissor.
With the shear, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as everyone was, but I was always just told bad, wrong, don't do it, razor, razor, razor. So, as soon as I left, the first thing I did was pick up a razor. I'm like, I want to do the bad thing.
And you do really good things with it.
Thank you.
You're a master razor cutter. I love watching you cut hair.
Yeah. Again, I got lucky, and just early on, I worked with some young hairdressers from Italy after I left Sassoon, and they did more razor cutting than scissor cutting. They did it like fast and dirty, but when they were done, it looked beautiful to me. Yeah. It was like, Nick Orojo, who's another friend and mentor, he said this to me because he had a similar path to me. And he was like, the scissor cutting that we learned is like a team on the football field, like or soccer, doing all these passes and very, very complicated. And everyone's running around. And at the end, they score goals like 50% of the time. Yeah. Where the razor, it's like just running straight down the field and kicking it in the net,
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I mean, not everyone agrees, and I can get into the philosophy. I love it all, but when I saw these guys work, and they would do like
it's like a paradigm shift, right? It's
100%.
Yeah, yep. That's what I feel so lucky that I got to be trained with Trevor, because when he left Sassoon, his dad was a barber, right? So he had learned how to use a razor as a barber with his father, and then he was like, you know what? I'm cutting hair with a razor, and he just went for it. So I was lucky to have both, the precision training and then the razor training. And
I completely agree. I remember I had, when I mentioned my uncle, he had these videos. There was all the Sassoon stuff, but he had some Trevor stuff. And I remember there was like a B-roll of him saying, even if it's wrong, it's right to at least try it and see what happens. And
I like that.
Yeah, and it was these awesome videos of him, just cutting with, they weren't any razor cuts in this one, but I just remember it being so different from Sassoon's, but then knowing that he had come from there. So it kind of gave me in my mind like a roadmap, like, okay, you do this, but then you embrace all these other things, I know that without precision, like even the two Italian brothers I was talking about, they had a strong foundation of precision.
Yeah.
Both of them had worked at Tony and Guy, and they understood, but when they just pulled out the razor, it just natural,
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Okay, now we'll get into a couple fun questions. So if you could style anyone's hair, living or dead, who would it be and why? I should say cut anyone's hair. Sorry.
It would be my mom. My mom passed away about, I don't know, I think it'll be 7 years now.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. It happens to all of us, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, she was always like my first, she always wore short hair since I was a kid. So, I always cut her hair every 4 weeks or so. And I would definitely cut her hair if I could.
Okay. Now you're Italian, right?
Half. My father is Italian. My mother was not Italian. She was Irish. So I'm a very New York, half Irish, half Italian. I have a very Italian last name, so it's easy to just go with that. But I am half. My mother was Irish. She was raised in New York, born in New York, but Irish heritage.
All right. I love the Irish and I love the Italians. So,
there you go. Perfect.
Good combo. So if your life as a hairdresser were a movie, what would it be called, and who would play the role of you?
I'd probably be called HairBrain, right? Why not use the equity?
Yes.
Yeah. Why not use the equity that we have? I know for years people have said, oh, you remind me of Seth Rogen. So maybe Seth Rogen could play me.
Okay, cool. So it'd be HairBrain the movie.
I don't see Seth Rogen. But people do.
No, I can see it. That's cool. Well, I just want to say thank you. I always say this to people, but you've got so much to share. I wish we could do another one, and we can do it.
Yeah, of course.
But I appreciate you coming on here and sharing with our listeners, and let's do it again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Anytime, let's get it on the calendar and do 2.0.
Yes. Thank you.